Something massive is unfolding, and it's happening faster than anyone expected. Ukraine's super weapons are being unleashed. Ukrainian engineers are doing the impossible, and the enemy is not ready for what's coming. And looking ahead to 2026, Ukraine is preparing not just to defend, but to strike deeper than ever before, including joint drone production with a powerful partner. At the same time, Crimea is being systematically stripped of protection. The Black Sea is slipping out of Moscow's control. But that's only part of the picture. Kazakhstan opens hundreds of criminal cases and shifts toward NATO standards. A former ally is drifting away, and the balance of power in the region may be changing forever. Meanwhile, in the Kremlin, Putin is being told a different story. Generals polish reports, losses are hidden, victories are manufactured. Watch until the end, all the details in our special edition of Hotspot. Ukraine is rapidly strengthening its military capabilities, driven both by substantial international military aid and the explosive growth of its domestic defense industry. Today, Ukraine's own producers already supply over 40% of the weapons used on the battlefield, from drones and missiles to artillery systems and armored vehicles. This surge highlights not only rapid adaptation under wartime pressure, but also sharp expansion of production capacity. What this shift means for the war and Ukraine's long-term military resilience in our full report.
Our own HIMARS, advanced domestic drone production, and Ukrainian naval drones. All of these are a nightmare for the enemy at night, and Ukraine has no intention of stopping. Ukraine is actively ramping up the scale of its own weapons production. Just last year, production capacity and output increased several times over.
Undoubtedly, since 2022, Ukraine's defense industrial complex has made not just a step forward, but I would say a leap forward. This is truly a high-quality, multifaceted development in the production of completely different types of weapons, ammunition, equipment, and armored vehicles.
Drone production. This is an area where Ukraine has not only developed significantly, but also holds leading positions in the world. In Ukraine, drone production has increased by 900% over the past year, according to Defense Express.
Today, Ukraine's defense industrial complex is at the forefront when it comes to drone system solutions. I can't name any other countries in the world where this category has developed so rapidly, both at the tactical and operational tactical levels.
The number of drones being delivered to the front has also increased significantly. By the end of 2025, the armed forces are expected to receive 3 million FPV drones. That's almost 2.5 times more than what was supplied to the Ukrainian armed forces last year.
At the same time, the overwhelming majority of these drones are domestically produced. Defense Minister Denis Shmyhal.
Moreover, in 2024, the government invested over 39 billion hryvnias in weapons production, which allowed the capacity of the domestic defense industry to increase sixfold, and now more than 96% of the drones used by the Ukrainian army are domestically produced.
We have developed not only a whole range of unmanned aerial vehicles capable of destroying Russian manpower, that is, infantry and equipment, at the tactical level on the battlefield, but also of striking the rear areas of the Russian Federation using both aerial and maritime strike drones.
Missiles are an important sector of domestic production. For example, Ukraine is working on its own version of the HIMARS system.
Although Ukraine will have its own missiles in service, there is a lack of experience and existing weaponry that could be used with the domestic missile system.
The emergence of a domestic HIMARS equivalent is clearly driven by the needs of the military and the development of Ukrainian strike capabilities, including long-range systems, as well as reducing dependence on the American defense industry.
It can be assumed that the Ukrainian missile system will be created through cooperation with the Budanov self-propelled artillery system, but when? Germany will allocate 750 million euros for the production of 200 units of our self-propelled artillery systems based on German Zetros trucks. Similarly, the production of Ukrainian missile systems could be funded in the future.
One of the most effective Ukrainian weapons is the Budanov artillery system. Its use accounts for about 40% of all artillery on the front line. Moreover, in terms of its characteristics, the system is approaching the French Caesar self-propelled artillery despite a shorter development and improvement period. Other Ukrainian developments also prove their effectiveness on the battlefield every day. For example, the number of successful hits by the Neptune missile has increased significantly. And the main value of the Sapsan missile system is its range and power, since it is designed to strike deep behind enemy lines.
If Sapsan goes into mass production, strikes will hit those areas much more frequently. It will be tough for the Russians.
The combat use of the Ruta drone missile has also increased.
The main advantage and capability of the Ruta is its high speed, 500 to 800 kilometers per hour, which reduces the effectiveness of Russian counterparts, namely mobile fire teams. And it completely eliminates Russian anti-drone helicopters from the list of air defense options.
And how could we not mention the Flamingo missile in this context? According to The Independent, the Ukrainian Flamingo missile is twice as good as the American Tomahawk. It has a range of up to 3,000 kilometers and can carry a warhead weighing over a ton.
The Flamingo has twice the range of the American Tomahawk and carries twice the explosive payload. To
Battle. The Flamingo has entered the fight, along with the long-range Neptune, Neptune D, and other types of missile and semi-missile weaponry, so to speak. It is already bringing its successes, yielding results, and of course 2026, I am more than certain, will see a much larger scale and, very importantly, a combined strike on Russian territory. Strikes that are similar and possibly even superior in some respects. And
of course, the nightmare of the Kerch Bridge, the SBU's Sea drones, Sea Baby.
the same air. Sea Baby can perform completely different drone missions or act as a kamikaze in various operations. And
these are just some of Ukraine's main developments. Many of them are produced under strict secrecy. Moreover, Western allies have increased their arms supplies to Ukraine. In particular, this concerns artillery. This was reported by President Volodymyr Zelensky. The main thing is that all these Ukrainian innovations point to one thing. Strikes against the enemy will become stronger and more precise.
If you want peace, prepare for war. And Ukraine is preparing not only to repel enemy attacks in 2026, but also to strike deep into Russian territory. In particular, Ukraine and Norway will open a joint drone production line in 2026. And that's far from the only bad news for the enemy. Our journalists have more. Watch now.
A new level and scale. Ukraine and Norway have reached an agreement on collaboration in the field of unmanned aerial vehicle production. The corresponding agreement was signed by the Ukrainian side with the Norwegian Minister of Defense. Denis Shmyhal emphasized that this cooperation will become an important stage in expanding Ukraine's production capabilities and strengthening the country's defense capacity. The top priority is the rapid deployment of an experimental production line as early as 2026.
We are gaining access not only to production facilities, but also to the technologies of NATO countries. This also means the opportunity for cooperation in the production of Ukrainian drones and, accordingly, the exchange of experience, as well as in the practical use of Ukrainian interceptor drones. Both strike drones and accordingly they're scaling up.
A similar model of cooperation is also being implemented with the United Kingdom. A few days ago, Kyiv signed a licensing agreement for large-scale production of Octopus interceptor drones at British facilities.
This is an exclusively Ukrainian development, and it already has real-world application in combat conditions. This drone can operate both at night and it is effective against electronic warfare systems, and notably, this drone can operate at low altitudes.
The manufactured interceptor drones will be delivered to Ukraine to strengthen its defense against Russian UAVs. The Octopus project is being implemented as a joint defense industrial initiative. The United Kingdom has obtained a license for mass production of the Ukrainian interceptor, and Ukraine will receive them to enhance its own interception capabilities.
The recently signed agreement comprehensively provides for the extensive production of several thousand crucial interceptor drones for the pressing needs of Ukraine's defense forces, specifically at various specialized enterprises located within the United Kingdom, which effectively eliminates any possibility for the Russian side to successfully destroy the vital defense plants actively manufacturing this essential product.
3 manufacturers have already received the necessary technologies to produce the Octopus drones. Another 11 companies are preparing production lines for them. After the start of Russia's full-scale aggression in 2022, the United Kingdom became one of Ukraine's main partners. London is providing powerful military assistance. In addition, the United Kingdom is actively promoting sanctions pressure on Russia and providing financial support to Kyiv.
The United Kingdom is a pioneer when it comes to practical implementation of so-called coalitions, drone coalitions, naval coalitions, strike capability coalitions, and accordingly it was the United Kingdom that delivered the first heavy weaponry to the Ukrainian side. In particular, we're talking about the Challenger 2 tank. Only after the corresponding actions by the United Kingdom did the United States deliver its Abrams tanks to the Ukrainian side.
There are also plans in Ukraine to create robotic strongpoints, which will be equipped with combat modules to counter Russian occupiers. First and foremost,
we are talking about the logistics component, meaning ground robots. They will take on the main part of logistics, reducing to zero the losses of personnel and, accordingly, equipment of the defense forces of Ukraine. This refers to the delivery of ammunition and, accordingly, the evacuation of the wounded. Additionally, these are engineering functions such as mining and demining areas.
Earlier, Ukraine, together with the United States, began producing drone interceptors capable of countering Russian strike UAVs. Additionally, the Dutch government will provide 250 million euros for the purchase of American weapons for Ukraine under the PRL program. In particular, anti-aircraft missiles for F-16s and ammunition, which Kiev needs most, will be purchased in the United States.
Kazakhstan has launched more than 700 criminal cases against its citizens who fought on Russia's side against Ukraine. At the same time, Astana is moving toward NATO standard weapons and rapidly expanding cooperation with the United States. Taken together, these steps suggest a strategic shift that would have seemed unthinkable just a few years ago. Is Kazakhstan quietly breaking away from Russia? And if so, what does this mean for the balance of power in the region? Full details in our report.
The Kremlin likes to say that Kazakhstan is an ally and a brother, a quiet rear, people for the front, money bypassing sanctions and loyalty by default. We
have a special relationship with Kazakhstan that's obvious. Everyone understands it well. We have an allied relationship in the most literal sense of the word.
But in reality, Astana itself is moving further away from Russia with each passing day.
Mr. President, I greatly appreciate your unwavering support for the development of multifaceted Kazakh-American cooperation. And I firmly believe that you, Mr. President, are a great leader, a statesman sent by the heavens to restore the common sense and traditions that we all share and value. And
is taking a demonstrative step by condemning its own citizens for fighting on Russia's side against Ukraine.
The authorities in Kazakhstan are carrying out mass persecution of participants in the war in Ukraine. In 2025, local law enforcement initiated a record 700 cases against those who enlisted in Russian military formations. In such cases, the courts do not care where the accused served. They hand down identical sentences both to Wagner PMC fighters and to those who signed contracts with the Ministry of Defense. From the perspective of Kazakhstan's criminal code, all of them were carrying out criminal intent by participating in the war.
Kazakhstan has never really supported the Kremlin's military adventures, but this was a punch in the gut for Putin. Although for Astana, such a decision is logical and necessary.
This speaks to the rather sensible policy of the Kazakh authorities. In very simple terms, they understand perfectly well that Kazakhstan could be one of Putin's next targets. That's why it's essential to build as much as possible, not even so much an agitation campaign, but to ensure that citizens clearly understand what's happening in Ukraine today. That this is an imperialist war waged by Russia with the aim of redrawing current borders. And accordingly, any other post-Soviet countries, and not only post-Soviet countries, could become targets for Putin. And that's why, of course, it's important to conduct explanatory work with our own citizens.
These are not just words, this is what, albeit quietly, Putin actually wants. And he's wanted this for a very long time. The US has declassified transcripts of Putin's conversations with President Bush from 2001. From these, it follows that Putin views Kazakhstan the same way he does Ukraine. Supposedly, the entire territory of the country is a gift from the Soviet Union.
The Russians gave away thousands of square kilometers of territory voluntarily, Putin said, to Bush in the summer of 2001. It's unheard of. Ukraine, which had been part of Russia for centuries, was given away. Kazakhstan was given away too, the Caucasus as well. It's hard to imagine, and it was done by the party leaders.
That's why Kazakhstan is working day by day to distance itself from Russia. It's not about breaking off relations, but about being able to conduct both foreign and domestic policy without looking back at Russia.
Already today, Russia has significantly lost its original historical influence in Kazakhstan. China's economic and political influence there is quite strong. Turkey's cultural and strategic influence is also strong, and the influence of the United States with its various interests is certainly also present. That's why I think that in this situation, Tokayev will draw even closer to some alternative international allies realizing that he needs serious protection from Vladimir Putin's militaristic and expansionist policies.
A slap in the face for the Kremlin was Kazakhstan's decision to launch a project to produce weapons according to NATO standards. In Russia, this has already been called an unfriendly act. Moreover, Russian politicians are saying that Kazakhstan is being turned into yet another Russophobic outpost.
The question immediately arises, why is NATO so interested in Kazakhstan in particular? Maybe it's because it borders Russia, and from this country, yet another Russophobic outpost could be created?
But again, this is Kazakhstan's contribution to its own security, because with a neighbor like Russia, you can expect anything.
All Russian military models, in fact, are quite significantly outdated in their technological capabilities and overall design. Therefore, of course, from the crucial perspective of national defense capability and strategic advantage, it's much more strategically interesting and beneficial to produce modern NATO standard weaponry and equipment. So this important decision, once again, clearly demonstrates the remarkable prudence and foresight of Kazakhstan's leadership in their long-term planning.
While Russia is at war and ends up on blacklists, Kazakhstan is becoming a country with which it is profitable and safe for the West to make deals. In particular, Kazakhstan is deepening its cooperation with America.
Kazakhstan and the United States have signed an agreement worth $17 billion. Kazakhstan is granting the United States access to its tungsten deposits. Trump invited Kazakhstan and Uzbekistan to the G20 summit in the United States of America.
But obviously, it's not just about resources. After the visit of Kazakhstan's President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev to the US, experts began actively discussing that Kazakhstan is now within Trump's sphere of interest. After Tokayev's visit to Washington, Russia also began circling around him from all sides, likely sensing that its ally was slipping away. Even the foul-mouthed propagandist Solovyov toned down his usual fervor and reacted calmly to the development of relations between Kazakhstan and the US.
The longest borders of the Russian Federation are actually with Kazakhstan. Now, many people are saying, well, the leadership of Kazakhstan was in America. They were. Did they talk to Trump? They did. So what do you expect?
Kazakhstan has quite specific economic and political objectives. Kazakhstan is in a very difficult geographical position. Next to it is giant Russia, and next to it is giant China. Of course. First and foremost, the leadership of Kazakhstan is interested in the interests of its own people and its own country. With
welcome banners all over Moscow for weeks. Later, Tokayev was received by Putin.
Dear Kassym-Jomart Kemelevic, good evening. First of all, I sincerely want to express my gratitude to you for graciously finding the necessary time to come, as we had previously agreed, on this very important and special state visit. I am sincerely glad about this.
As a result of the negotiations, Kazakhstan and Russia signed a treaty on comprehensive cooperation.
President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, and President of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Kassym-Jomart Kemelevic Tokayev, are signing the declaration on elevating interstate relations between the Russian Federation and the Republic of Kazakhstan to the level of comprehensive strategic partnership and alliance.
But experts call this agreement an empty shell because after it was signed, absolutely nothing changed in the relations between Russia and Kazakhstan.
It was more like, well, a ceremonial ritual visit, so to speak, because behind any substantial concrete actions, there should always be clear, well-defined agreements and absolutely clear, comprehensive treaties. There is nothing more concrete there except for pretty words, a bit more of an Eastern cunning. Yes, well, we'll tell you, yes, yes, great Tsar, we'll nod along to you. But in reality, we'll be developing cooperation with completely different countries and shaping our own foreign policy. In fact, moving away from Russia, not getting closer to it. Therefore, in my opinion, this is exactly what it shows.
It's obvious that today this alliance exists only in words. Kazakhstan is not showing an anti-Russian stance. It is simply acting in its own interests. And for the Kremlin, this is perhaps even worse than open confrontation. After all, it turns out, right next door, there is a country that no longer asks for permission.
Crimea is coming home. Russian air defense systems on the peninsula are being systematically and precisely destroyed, depriving the occupiers of protection and control of the skies. At the same time, maritime routes to Crimea are largely cut off Russian forces. The Black Sea is now dominated by the armed forces of Ukraine. What once seemed untouchable is becoming vulnerable. Step by step, Ukraine is dismantling the enemy's military infrastructure, isolating the peninsula, and stripping the occupiers of their ability to operate freely. More about that in the next report.
On December 20th, long-range drones operated by the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, struck the Belbek airfield in temporarily occupied Crimea. As a result of the attack, 2 Su-27 fighter jets were seriously damaged.
One of the aircraft was on the taxiway, fully armed and ready for a combat sortie. It was destroyed. The estimated value of both aircraft is about $70 million. Additionally, the destruction of the control tower has been confirmed, which may complicate the organization of flight control at the airfield. SBU Press Service.
This is already the second successful SBU attack on the Belbek airfield in the past week. On December 18th, Ukrainian drones destroyed Russian equipment worth hundreds of millions of dollars. 2 Nebo SVU radars, a 92 A6 radar from the S-400 Triumph air defense system, a Panzer S-2 air defense system, and a MiG-31 aircraft with a full combat load. Such systematic strikes on the peninsula are of strategic importance.
Belbek and Crimea as a whole are important because they are close to the main part of Ukraine. Accordingly, the shorter the distance to the front line and to Ukrainian positions, the less you have to fly and the harder it is to detect you in time. Understanding this, naturally, Ukrainian forces try to destroy all such military facilities, including airfields and aircraft stationed there, so that they cannot be used. The fewer radars there are, the worse Russian air defense can see Ukrainian drones that might be flying toward Crimea or, for example, toward Novorossiysk, where the Russian Black Sea Fleet base is located. Accordingly, the Russian army is essentially blinded by this without those very radars.
The fact that a radar station was destroyed during the December 18th attack is evidenced by the successful attack on the 20th, when air defense forces were basically firing at drones at random. Back in 2021, Belbek was the most important Russian airbase in Crimea. Up to 46 Su-27 and Su-30 fighter jets from the 38th Fighter Aviation Regiment were stationed here, along with a contingent of about 10 Su-34 fighter bombers and a number of support aircraft and helicopters, numerous radars and air defense systems. Now, almost all military aircraft have been removed from the peninsula, and those that remain are systematically being destroyed by the Ukrainian armed forces.
Now we can talk about this particular Varshavyanka-class submarine. This is not the first loss of a Russian submarine in this war. They were indeed the very first country since the end of World War II to tragically lose a submarine in active combat operations. And now, quite astonishingly, they've already tragically lost 2 of these vital vessels. For obvious reasons, the Russians haven't left anything valuable from their fleet in Crimea. The main reason the remnants of the Black Sea Fleet still exist is their mobility and stealth. In terms of mobility, this means constantly changing their anchorage. The ships are constantly being moved around the harbor or taken out of the base if they realize we're about to strike. Dmytro Pletenchuk, spokesperson for the Ukrainian Navy.
Due to the lack of sufficient air defense and radar systems on the occupied peninsula, which the Ukrainian armed forces are systematically knocking out, the neighboring Krasnodar region, specifically Novoazovsk, is also suffering. That's where the remnants of the Black Sea Fleet are stationed. Recently, Ukrainian forces managed to seriously damage a submarine. Russia has become the first country in the world since World War II to lose a second submarine as a result of combat operations.
This is a very convenient location for knocking out Russian air defense assets. These are not only radar stations, but also anti-aircraft missile systems. Even the radar for the unique S-500 was destroyed there. The work is being carried out methodically, and the enemy cannot help but defend the military facilities it has on the occupied peninsula. And they are forced to reinforce and replenish their air defense losses. Oleg Kotkov, military expert, editor-in-chief of Defense Express.
In addition to strikes with Ukrainian weapons, the armed forces of Ukraine are systematically hitting military targets on the peninsula with Western weapons, and no special permission is needed for this, since Crimea is internationally recognized as Ukrainian territory. Currently, Crimea is under the fire control of the defense forces. The Russian occupiers are simply forced to withdraw both ships and aircraft from the peninsula as their equipment is being systematically destroyed.
Vladimir Putin remains convinced that a total victory in Ukraine is within reach. Russian generals and security services are once again and systematically polishing frontline reports. Western media say Putin regularly meets with trusted insiders who warn that the war is increasingly hitting Russia's economy, yet he still clings to the belief in victory. At military briefings, Ukrainian losses are exaggerated, Moscow's supposed resource advantages are highlighted, and tactical failures are quietly brushed aside. How Putin's generals manufacture successes for their leader while concealing real defeats, coming up next in our report.
Russian generals and intelligence agencies embellish reports about the situation at the front for the Russian dictator Vladimir Putin.
The West military group has taken control of the strategically important city of Kupiansk, which the enemy is unsuccessfully trying to reclaim.
Putin believes that Russia has almost defeated Ukraine and therefore refuses a ceasefire. This is reported by the Financial Times. Western officials told the publication that Putin, under the influence of fake information coming into the Kremlin, refuses to accept favorable terms for ending the war offered by American President Donald Trump.
Russian military and intelligence agencies regularly provide Putin with reports on the war. These reports exaggerate Ukraine's losses, highlight the advantages of the Russian Federation in terms of resources, and downplay tactical failures.
According to the publication's sources, this optimistic picture presented to the Kremlin dictator during military briefings makes him believe that he can win the war.
Our troops are grinding down the enemy, their formations and reserves.
Putin's blind faith remains unchanged even though he regularly meets with trusted confidants who explain to him how the war is becoming an increasing burden for Moscow's faltering economy.
Russian generals tell Putin what he wants to hear. He wants victories from them, demands victories, and they present these victories to him.
The key figure responsible for informing Putin about the situation at the front is the chief of the General Staff of the Russian Armed Forces, Valery Gerasimov. Encouraged by information that Ukraine would not offer resistance, he led the offensive on Kiev in February of 2022, which ended in failure and a humiliating retreat. In August 2024, Gerasimov reported to Putin that Russia had stopped the advance of Ukrainian defense forces in the Kursk region, although part of the territory was already under the control of Ukrainian troops. On November 20th, Valery Gerasimov announced the capture of Kupiansk by Russian forces.
The units of the West Group liberated the city of Kupiansk and continues the destruction of Ukrainian armed forces formations encircled on the left bank of the Oskol River.
For the generals, the continuation of the war is a blessing, since they gain status, funds, and resources. They are the most significant people in the state, so why not fabricate victories? Especially if the leadership demands them. Later, if anything, we can fix it somehow.
Following Gerasimov, Putin himself continued to talk about Kupiansk and its capture. According to the Russian dictator, Ukrainian forces near Pokrovsk and Kupiansk are blocked.
The Kupiansk and mountainous Krasnoarmysk adversary ended up encircled and blocked. By the way, I discussed this issue with the commanders of the respective groups. They're not at all opposed to potentially allowing media representatives, including journalists and reporters, into the enemy's heavily fortified encirclement zone, which is a restricted area.
Amidst active fighting on December 12th, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky arrived in Kupiansk-Kharkiv region. He posted a selfie video on social media. Near the bullet-riddled stele at the entrance to the city, he demonstrated that the Russian side's claims of supposedly full control over Kupiansk do not correspond to reality, and that Kupiansk is controlled by Ukraine.
Today, the Kupiansk direction, our soldiers here are achieving results for Ukraine. The Russians have said a lot about Kupiansk. We see this. I was there. I congratulated the guys. And
so what do Putin's pathetic attempts to explain Zelensky's video look like? Near the stele at the entrance to Kupiansk, which the dictator had previously claimed to have taken. During a live broadcast, Putin repeated that the city is under Russian control and called Zelensky's video a fake.
He's a talented performer, and I say that without any irony. We know this from his movies, even from earlier times. So there's nothing unusual about this. They say the stele looks completely different now, but that's not the point. The stele is about 1 kilometer away from the city itself, so why just stand on the doorstep? Come on in. That's absolutely right. If the strategic city of Kupiansk is already firmly under their complete control, then the situation becomes significantly more critical.
Military experts confirm that Putin is systematically being lied to about the situation at the front, and in particular about Kupiansk.
The Russians have already claimed 3 times that they've surrounded and captured Kupiansk. Or, as they say, that they've liberated it. For this, General Kuzovlev himself, who is the commander of the Western forces, was even awarded the title Hero of the Russian Federation on December 9th.
Meanwhile, ZVN correspondents have started backtracking and are openly stating that the Russian military is exhausted. So taking any major cities is out of the question.
Believe me, our troops are really worn out, exhausted, depleted. Everyone who has been there knows this perfectly well.
Meanwhile, Z channels are reporting that Ukraine has effectively regained control over the city. Russian troops no longer control Kupiansk.
Judging by this map, the armed forces of the Russian Federation have already lost almost the entire territory of Kupiansk. But at least everyone got their medals. Apparently, in the future, we should expect a third liberation of Kupiansk. The situation has developed so that reports were filed, and now all the regiments are being forced to match those reports. The 122nd and 106th are talking about Ina, and from the headquarters, the reconnaissance is also not Pisa. About her Kupiansk.
According to the Rybar channel, which is affiliated with the Ministry of Defense, the situation in the city for Russian troops has become worse than critical. Russians write that a significant part of the bridgehead on the western bank of the Oskil River, including the villages of Kondrashovka, Rodkovka, and Moskovka, as well as the area near the dairy canning plant, have been lost. Also, according to Rybar, in December, one of the units lost almost 1,500 soldiers on the approaches to one of the villages. Back in November. According to the published map of hostilities, most of Kupiansk is now under the control of the Ukrainian armed forces, and clashes continue only on its northeastern outskirts.
Thanks to the efforts of the Ukrainian Defense Forces, various units and different security agencies, control over Kupiansk was regained. Now we can observe the development of a rather difficult situation for the Russian occupation forces.
Probably Putin could find some alternative ways to get information if he really wanted to. But obviously he is satisfied with everything as it is. In other words, he wants to be lied to, and as long as those lies satisfy him, that's enough. Again, the generals are, in a way, Putin's allies in his internal bureaucratic struggle against all those boring and gloomy economists who constantly tell him that maybe it's time to stop, maybe it's worth considering a ceasefire.
Well, as long as Russian generals keep painting fake victories for Putin, he continues to believe in this illusion. But on the front lines, the reality is completely different. And that's exactly what we're seeing now in Kupiansk.
At this moment, that's all from me, Maria Farafonova. Even more hellish frontline news in our next episode. But for now, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. See you soon.